Bye-bye. Stay. I think this is wrong. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد خاتم النبيين وإمام المرسلين وعلى أهله الطيبين الطاهرين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، قال جل وعلا في كتاب مبين: إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد. وقال الإمام شرف الدين البوصيري في قصيدة المديح: يا لائمي في حوى الأذري معذرة مني إليك ولا أنصفت، لم تلمي عدتك حالي لا سري بمستتر عن المشاة ولا دائي بمنحسم، ما حطني نصحا لكن لست أسمعه، إن المحب عن الأذال في صمم، إن اتهمت نصيح الشيب في عدل في عضل وشيب أبعد في نصح عن التهم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Today's lesson is a bit of an odd lesson actually, because topics are a bit odd. This line of the Burda, that we're only going to cover one line today. To be honest, I could finish the chapter here, but we don't have enough time as well. We have to finish at 9 o'clock. And the last 3 lines, line 11 anyway, needs a bit of explanation. But this line, يا لائمي في الهوى الأذري معذرة, line number 9. Line 8 we covered. نعم صراتيف من أهوى. We covered that line, yeah? Yeah. This line, line number 9 is probably, I can't know, probably said about most of the lines, but it's one of the most important lines in chapter 1. But however, it's a odd line compared to all the others. The reason it's odd is because you'll understand why it's odd. Now, this can go in a few different ways, basically. Put this on. Yeah, let's start and you'll understand as well. This particular line has this line covers a particular concept in some of the major commentaries, and the discussion in relation to that takes it away a little bit from the topic of the Burda, just a little bit. So I'm going to try to connect it to the kind of the overall meaning of the chapter, but please bear with me. I'll read the translation and then I'll break the words down, inshallah. So he says, "O you who would rebuke me for this pure love, accept my excuse. If you were truly fair, you would not reproach me at all." It seems pretty straightforward. I mean, it's not that difficult to understand the English there. It seems that he's saying that people who rebuke him for being in love, he wants to be excused from their censure and rebuke. And then he says, if you were truly fair, you wouldn't reproach me, meaning that if you really truly knew how I felt, you wouldn't censure me or you wouldn't rebuke me. But the line has much more than that. That's the big problem with this line. Now, the whole line is based on 2 words in this. It's not. I didn't bring my connector. Yeah, put that line up if you can. The main words in the whole line are on the first hemistitch. Do you see that the word or the compound al-hawal al-udhri? See, al-hawal al-udhri. So it says ya la'imi fil hawal udhri. Those 2 words, hawal udhri, the whole line can be just understood if you understand those 2 words. So basically, we're going to spend the whole hour discussing those 2 words. Now, it's a very dangerous topic, actually. That's why I was a bit uh, ambiguous in my words at the beginning. It's a very dangerous topic because the problem is I don't want anybody to misinterpret what I'm going to say. Basically, it can very easily be misinterpreted. Okay, especially young people, because yeah, okay, you'll see what I mean. So let's begin. So he begins and uses the word la'im. Allah mentions this word in the Quran as well, talking about the people of God. وَلَا يَخَافُونَ لَوْمَةَ لَائِمٍ, that they do not fear, the people of God do not fear the censure of those who censure them. لَوْمَةَ لَائِمٍ. La'im is negative word. It's not a good word. Lawma. In this case especially, it's essentially when there's more to this, but it's essentially when somebody doesn't really understand and they seem to criticize or critique things without a kind of prior understanding of the situation. And essentially the people of God don't care for that. And this is one of the things that you may see in your lives. If you become successful at anything, one of the first things that you receive is kind of criticism for, even if it's completely unwarranted, you'll receive criticism. The people of God, it's slightly different, because the people of God often, it's an honor that's that somebody criticizes something very personal to them. And God will test them with such things, such rumors. Look, say the Aisha, for instance, radiallahu anha. And she was one very beloved to God. In the story of Ifk, when her necklace was lost and she returned back from the expedition late, she was accused of adultery, and she was very young at that point. And she was also accused not only by people that you can just dismiss. There were some people that were involved in that, unfortunately, that were also people of reputable people as well. And God exonerated her, but it was a test from God. But the people of God essentially received the hardest tests. And they're censured in a way, I wouldn't say rebuked even, but they, in this context, yes, but they criticize in a manner that is completely unwarranted. Look at the messengers of God. They were not only, there wasn't just Lawmatul La'im, they were killed. Bani Israel killed some of Bani Israel. They cut their prophets in half, and that's people of God. That's what they have to be prepared to go through in delivering their message. Now, there are a lot of things we can say here, but Busayri, firstly, let me take it to Busayri. What's Busayri's position here? Busayri, obviously, this could be something really that was happening, or he's giving a general. It's more archetypal, or it could have been something that was happening. He was incredibly ill. Remember, he couldn't move much at all. He was very clearly unable to do much, and it was due to, according to him and what it seems, because of his almost being predominated by feeling for the Prophet ﷺ, which is, we can see that very clearly. So, but however, we know this here. This is the tajreed shakhsi. It's a rhetorical device that's employed, where what Busayri is actually doing is he's talking to his alter ego. We're saying to him, "What are you playing at? You're damaging yourself. Look at you." So we know that that's part of the chapter. But what I want to talk about is this hawal udhr, this incredible thing. And I say, please don't misconstrue my words, because they can lead to other meanings. These two words are only really used in this manner by poets. Bear that in mind. You will not find this hadith literature, for instance. This compound, this this noun and its adjective, al-hawal udhri, is only used by poets. Here we've translated it. Aziza Hafidahullah has translated it as pure love, which is a correct translation, but the meaning needs to be unpacked. Now, the word hawa, we covered it earlier in earlier lessons. Hawa is a type of a desire. It can be positive, it can be negative. Often the word hawa is used negatively. You find hawa in the Arabic language anyway, like don't talk from your hawa, which means, and Allah uses وَمَا يَنْطِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَى, meaning the Prophet ﷺ does not speak from his own desire. So hawa is used negatively, but hawa can be positive as well. If you recall the lesson about love and the types of love, one of the types of love is hawa. It can be positive as well. You see, because it's just the feeling, a sensation. Now, other words are used for love as well, like hub and ishq. Hub and ishq have an actual difference. The word ishq in the Arabic language is often used for something sensual, whereas hub is not. It's not used for that. It's not used for that, and some of the early scholars had a problem with people using the word ishq for Allah. Others didn't. Some did. Al-Izz ibn Salam, for instance, did. They use hub instead. Allah doesn't use that word in attribution to it, or it doesn't annex that word with his own name in the Quran anyway. Ishq, the word ishq, because it has a kind of sensual meaning to it. But hub is more pure. Now here he says hawa. If we say hawa is love, what does udhri mean? So the lesson will be on udhri. Udhri is now I'm going to give two different commentaries to the word for this word. And two different meanings, completely different meanings. Okay. Now, either udhri is from the Arabic word udhr. Udhr in the Arabic word means a reason or an excuse. It's a legal word. You use it in fiqh. In fiqh, for instance, there's a type of person known as ma'zur, what we call in Urdu ma'zur. Ma'zur is a person, for instance, who can't keep his he has a problem with salasul bawl, drops of urine, or he has a cut that he can't stop. He can't stop his arm bleeding, for instance. So he bandages it and he wipes over that bandage. That's known as ma'zur in law. So he has a reason for that. There's a legal dispensation for him, an udhr. So one of the meanings, and I'm not really going to accept that here specific, to be honest with you, but it is a meaning. Imam Maqlash in his commentary, he actually discusses. It seems that that's what his opinion is. He says that it's a type of love he's talking about that there's a valid reason for. You see? So al-hub al-udhri, al-hawa al-udhri to him is, he's saying that what this means is, and others talk about this, but I don't think this is what Busayri is trying to say, that it's a type of love that has an excuse that I can actually, justify it. And he definitely can, because it's for the Prophet ﷺ. Of course, you can not only justify, it's wajib. It's wajib what he's feeling is necessary for anybody who can claim true love. So that's one meaning. But the meaning that I want to explore, because that's quite easy, you see. The meaning that I want to explore is the second interpretation of this word, which Kharputi dedicates his whole chapter to. In fact, but I was quite astounded with Imam Kharputi, who wrote the best commentary ever on Qissa Burda, in my reading of it anyway, was done by Ibn Ajiba al-Darqawi. Ibn Ajiba, the great Shadhili master, lived around 200 years ago, did outdo him, because he takes this to another level, and he dedicates 4 pages to it. The one line, that is 5 pages, I think, 6 pages to one line. And I want to explore this concept now. This opinion suggests that understanding of this, and I think it's a correct understanding, that this word udhri comes from the word udhra, or the name of a tribe, Bani Udhra. Bani Udhra are a Yemeni tribe. They settled in different parts of Arabia as well. In fact, we know of Bani Udhra in hadith literature, generally not for this particular reason, but they mention in Iraq they settled as well. Bani Udhra were, you'll know them in a reason. You know them for one reason only. If you may not know the name, but you know who they are. And one of the character traits, and Ibn Ajiba makes a very important point. He says that different Arab tribes had different character traits. For instance, a particular Arab tribe, he says, were famous for Ain, Ain, like evil eye. and others were famous for other things, different things. And in fact, he gives an evidence from hadith that one of the companions, the Prophet ﷺ, told him to be an archer, and they said from a person from a particular tribe, he told him to be an archer. He said, why? Because he said one of your forefathers was an archer, meaning that it seems that it's almost within people, their genetics, that their DNA, that they can do that. You can investigate that as much as you want, but we have it also in Pakistan. Certain aqwam have certain traits, you see, that are more prevalent than other traits in their particular behavior. But regardless, so Bani Udra were known only for one thing, well, two things. The first thing, they were incredibly eloquent. So eloquent that Asma'i narrates that he went to learn eloquence from them. They were incredibly eloquent people. But what they were actually famous for was, now I have to divide this up, because they were very famous for very easily falling in love. Their men would fall in love very, very easily, and I assume the women as well. But however, what's incredible about them, their women were known for their chastity or chastity. Their women were incredibly chaste. They were incredibly pious. They were known for their, what we call iffa, very famous for their iffa. They were very famous for their purity, their women, to such a degree that their women knew their men so well that they wouldn't come out of their houses. They would just stay there, because they were feared that one of their men may fall in love with them. And anyway, and you'll understand what's coming now. And this tribe, the most famous person of this tribe that you probably know is Majnun. Majnun's name is Qais ibn Mulawwah, and he is from Bani Udra. Now, you know his story, but I want to talk a little bit about him. He's very famous. He's a real person. He was from the Salaf, from the early generations, and he is incredible for several reasons, because a lot of Sufi poetry is based on him. Umar ibn Farid dedicates poems to him, and the reason that the Sufis talk about him because due to the archetype of love, almost Platonic understanding of it. They see love as something archetypal. They look at the kind of concept behind. They try to conceptualize love itself. So don't think that the people are using the story of Layla and Majnun because of the relationship of Layla and Majnun. They couldn't care less about the relationship with Layla and Majnun. What they're looking at is the archetype. They're looking at love, you see, and what transcendent love is, and because the love for God transcends this world. You see, well, it should. So that's why they use this particular story. And there's an incredible thing Ibn Ajiba mentions, I'll save it for later, about one story about him specifically. Now, what happens, Asma'i, he travels to Yemen, and there's a story about him, just to kind of paint a picture of what these people are actually like. So he says, I went there, and I kind of just give you snippets of the story. He found that there was a man, he found a young man, and he looked very pale, very ill, something seriously wrong with him. And he said, what's the matter? He said, look, there's this girl, and Asma'i narrates, I don't know if Asma'i himself, he says, and Asma'i Arada, was staying at a place where this girl that he was in love with, he knew who she was. He said, that girl, I'm in love with her, I'm going to die, basically. I'm going to die. And so Asma'i, he talks about this story between the two. And anyway, this guy ends up burning half of his body, not by choice, because Asma'i arranges a meeting between them, and it's evening time and there's fire, and he's so shocked that he falls into the fire. But anyway, then Asma'i, he goes to a place in the village, and he sees a line of poetry on the. I'm gonna read the poetry to you because it's incredible, on one of the rocks, or some stone. And the line of poetry reads as follows. It's يا معشر الأشاق بالله أخبروا أخبروا عفوا إذا اشتد عشقا بالفتى كيف يصنع. He says that. So this line of poetry he sees, this poet says, "Oh lovers, by God, declare, tell everybody, announce, when love becomes extreme, إذا اشتد عشق بالفتى, with a girl, كيف يصنع, what are you supposed to do? You know, كيف, how can you control it? So what Asma'i does is he writes a line of poetry and then he's thinking the man's going to come back and see. So he writes يداري هواه ثم يكتم سره ويكتم سره ويصبر في كل الأمور ويخشع. So now Asma'i isn't from Bani Udra, so he's going to say, okay, of course, man, you can control it, this is what you do. So he says, Asma'i says, yudari hawahu. Now this can mean different things, meaning kind of comfort yourself and your desire, meaning control yourself basically. Control yourself and be easy about it. Be easy about it. ثم يكتم سره. Then hide your secret. Keep it to yourself basically. Hide your secret. Keep it inside. ويصبر في كل الأمور ويخشع, and be very patient and ويخشع, and have some fear in you as well. You know, or be submissive. Be a little submissive. So he comes back the next day and he sees a line of poetry. فكيف يداري والهوى قاتل الفتى. Yeah. وفي كل يوم روحه يتقطع. He says, how are you supposed to be gentle about it, be submissive about it, when love itself kills young people? Yeah, قاتل الفتى. Meaning, how are you supposed to treat it kindly when it kills you? How you to control something when it's trying to kill you? He says, وفي كل يوم روحه يتقطع, and every day the soul is torn apart. So he writes back, he writes, he says, إذا لم يطق صبرا وقتما لسره, said, if you can't bear to be patient and hide it, he said, فليس له مما سوى الموت أنفعه. So there's nothing better than death for you. So he goes back the next day and he sees a man dead on the floor. He sees him dead and a line written in blood. And the man has written, سمعنا وطعنا ثم متنا فبلغه. He said, we heard, obeyed, and then we died. So announce, salami ila man kana lil wasli yamna'u. My salam to that person who was prevented by reaching his goal. Meaning death is the only way out of this. So anyway, this is a description of these people, that this is how he finds them. So this is what Busiri is talking about, al-hawa al-udhri. But there are many more stories to this. So now I'm going to talk Ibn Ajiba a bit, Layla Majnun, and then I'm going to talk about the Prophet ﷺ, where this fits in. Ibn Ajiba talks about some really amazing things and two real important stories, and he says that Majnun, whose name is Qais, what happened to him? The early story is a bit sketchy, we don't really know. I did discuss this right at the beginning a little bit of the Burda. What happened to him was he went mad. Majnun is he wanted to marry Layla. Some say he never actually talked to Layla ever. Well, I think that's correct. I think he probably saw her once maybe. That's the report. Anyway, he saw her, fell in love with her, and he was poor, and he went to her father, and her father kind of laughed it off and said, you know, you ain't got a degree or. That doesn't mean, like, by the way, when people say, when, you know, I remember Shaykh al-Huda came here and he said, those who want to get married, all you need is a double-sized bed and an extra loaf of bread. And so people, all these kind of bumsy, and I thought, you know what, I don't need any money or anything, I'm going to get married. Nobody's going to give you their daughters if you haven't got a job, basically, and rightly so. Don't interpret that to mean that, you know, now the Shaykh said I should get married. If you haven't got anything, it's anyway. So and similarly, don't like when you Majnun is a rarity. The only one Majnun in history. So all these kind of people, when they say, you know, oh, you know, I'm feeling that, you know, I kind of can relate. No, you can't. Nobody can relate to Majnun. Nobody in history can relate to Majnun. And I'll explain why. What the Salaf said about Majnun. Nobody can relate to Qais. Qais is an anomaly, is a complete and utter anomaly. No, it will never happen again. I tell you, I promise you that. Although the Indians have got Hiranja, and that isn't Qais, that's something else, you know. Anil Kapoor, no, Anil Kapoor. Now, so the Sheikh says that, talks about Majnun ibn Ajiba, and he says that what happened was, Utbi narrates that لم يبلغ أحد من المحبين ما بلغ قيس المجنون. Nobody reached the level that Qais reached in love. Yeah, in love. And he says that he became such that he lost his mind. لا يعقل يعني. He couldn't compute anything anymore. You know, and he would talk to himself, and he wouldn't engage with anybody, wouldn't sit with anybody. And when he did sit with them, he would just tell them about Layla. So he was a poet, you see, because we talked about they were famous for their poetry. So he would just talk about Layla all the time. And if you kind of broke him in the conversation, we'll walk off. Like if you gave your 5 pence worth, he'll say like, "I'll forget you," then go away. Because how can you talk about Layla or love? Who are you? You know. And so he would leave. And what's next is actually amazing what he narrates. He says that a person, one of the Salaf, this is one of the early generations, they saw a Majnun, a Qais in their dream. In his dream, he saw a Qais in his dream. And he said to him, "Ma fa'al Allah bik?" Well, what did God do with you? You know, you were like a crazy man. And Majnun said to him, he said, he forgave me. And not only did he forgive me, he said he made me وَجَعَلَنِي حُجَّةً عَلَى الْمُحِبِّينَ. Now what he says is incredible. He says he forgave me, and what he did was he took my measure of love as a standard God did, and he placed it there. Just so you can imagine hub and standard love and its standard base basically, and made my standard of love basically a standard for everybody else. So he continues, and he says, Ibn Ajiba, that is narrated that on the day of judgment, somebody must have seen this, that that somebody calls out from somebody calls out on behalf of God, and says, "Aina Majnun, Aina Majnunu Layla." Where's the crazy man who loved Layla? Majnunu Layla. And so فَيُؤْتَى بِهِ لَبَّيْكِ, he turns up, and God places him in front of people, Majnun. And أَشْعَثَ أَغْبَرَ, completely disheveled, dust in his hair. And كَأَنَّهُ الْغُولِ, يعني he's a ghost. A ghul is like a ghul in English is from the Arabic of ghul. Do you know Batman? Raza Ghul. It's a Ra'sul Ghul, is Arabic they've used, the head of the demon. Anyway, throw that in there. So now God brings him forth, and and he's put to a questioning. So it's all weighed up, his deeds, and after it's all weighed up, God forgives him. So he's first, like everybody else, يعني yuhasab, then he's forgiven. And now listen to this, is incredible, this line. And then God says, after calling Majnun, he says, أَيْنَ الَّذِي إِدَّعُوا مَحَبَّتِي. He says, go and call all those people from the earth that said that they loved me. Majnun, we know he loved Layla. He never said he loved me. Now call all those charlatans who said they loved me. Bring them in front of me now. And then God says, هَلْ فِيكُمْ مَنْ بَلَغَ فِي تَاعَةِ مِثْلَ مَا بَلَغَ قَيْسَ فِي تَاعَةِ لَيْلَى. Is there any of you who is is there anybody from you who was obedient to me like Majnun was obedient to Layla? Any of you? And في تَعَلَّ وَمَحَبَّتِهِ, and the love that he had for Layla, meaning God uses him as a standard on the day of judgment. And the poet, he says, and then Ibn Ajiba quotes a page later, but in commentary of this I would assume it's appropriate. تأسي إلها وأنت تظهر حبه هذا محال في الفعال بديء لو أن حبك صادق لعتاته إن المحب لمن يحب مطيع. That the poet says, you disobey God, تأسي إلها وأنت تظهر حبه, but you tell everybody you love God. He says, هذا محال في الفعال بديء. What an odd thing to do or say, meaning the irony in that. لو أن حبك صادق لعتعته, if your love were true you would have obeyed him. إن المحب لمن يحب مطيع, for one who loves another truly obeys them. And what obedience means here, it submits to that person. So this is what Ibn Ajiba says about about Majnun. Now, then he goes on to talk about different stories about like this Hawa al-Uzri, and the balance. Before I come back to relating this to the Prophet ﷺ. So this one really beautiful story he mentions. He talks about a young man, and he fell in love with a girl, and but he when he went to make a khitbah, like a khitbah, offer, ask her father for her hand. Khutbah and khitbah, khutbah, the imam that he makes on Jumu'ah, and khitbah, they're kind of the same thing. The imam is trying to convince you, and you're trying to convince the father-in-law. The imam's very good at it. That's why they never have a problem getting married. So maybe we need to get trained by the imams if we have problems getting married in how to speak. Anyway, so he falls in love with her, and her father rejects him because he's a poor man. He's a poor man, and this story really is incredible. And so she finds out, and she sends a messenger to him. And what she says to him is that for as much as you love me, I love you ad'af, yani. I love you double that. I love you double that, or triple or quadruple that. And if you want, I'll run away with you. I'll run away with you. And if you want, basically, I will have relations with you. Yeah. So the messenger comes back to this young man, and for Arsala, and by the way, the messenger tells all of this to this young man. So he sends him back, and he says, tell her, he says, كل ذلك لا حاجة لي فيه. He said, I don't have any need for that. He said, for I fear نارا تلظى وعذابا لا ينقطع أبدا. He said, I fear hellfire, and I fear a punishment that will never end. And when the messenger returns to this woman and tells her, she begins to cry and weep, and she says, Wallahi ma ahad awla bihadha al-amr minni. And this can mean two things: either that after what I've just said, this is what I deserve, or can mean that I should have behaved like this to begin with. Now what happens is that she becomes, she then realizes what she had almost proposed, and واشتغلت بالعبادة, يعني she becomes incredibly pious, and she dies very soon after that. She passes away. What happens is a young man, meaning him, he realizes she's passed away, comes to a grave. He visits her grave every day. يأتي قبرها كل يوم ويدعو يستغفر ثم ينصرف. He would make dua for her, make istighfar, and then he would go. And she came in his dream. فجاءت في النوم في بعض الليالي. And she's what happens is فقال لها فلان. Yeah. So a woman comes to him and says, a certain person said this. Anyway, he asks about her state, what happened to her after she died. And she says, إلى نعيم وعيش لا زوال له في جنات وخلود ليس بالفنان. She says that I'm in a place that's forever Jannah, and a life that will never end, and forever I will abide therein. And so فقال لها, he says to her, do you remember me? Like, do you think of me after that? And the point here that he's making is that the transcendence of love, essentially. Love is because people wonder, when I die, what will I be like? Will I remember things? Will I still have certain feelings? He said, do you think of me at all? And she says, Wallahi la ansaka, I never forgotten you. And she says, he says, فَمَتَى الْمُلْتَقَى. He says, when are we going to meet? And she says, عَنْ قَرِيبٍ, very soon, don't worry about that. And what happens to him is he dies after a few days. ثُمَّ أَدْرَكَ الْمَوْتِ وَلَحِقَ بِهَا رَحْمَةُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِمَا. And then he meets her. And the point of that particular story was, and I'm going to talk about, there were two aspects of that story. The first was that what related to the first meaning of udhr I gave, which is love is something that you can't prevent, you can't do anything about it. It just happens. It's not something that people generally decide to do. It's something that just occurs. It happens to people, and it can happen to anybody. It happened to Sahaba. I mean, so it's something that just can occur. But we have a kind of a channel, a way to channel that, which is nikah, a marriage. People can get married, but love is something natural. So the first point of that story essentially is that people falling in love, there's nothing wrong with it. Like, it's not haram to fall in love. It's just a feeling, and it's a natural feeling that people go through. So there's nothing wrong with that. But the second part of the story is it's what you do about it. That's the problem, you see. It's what you do about it. And this man chose to not commit haram, and Allah rewarded him with what he wanted. What he wanted, God gave him, and that's no problem for God, you see, whatsoever. And this is why right at the beginning, I had some other story that you can easily misconstrue what this means here, because if all the Sufis are talking about Layla and Majnun, people are going to think they're Majnun or Layla. By the way, Layla got married. I don't know if you know. If you read it on Facebook or what. Facebook has a status, married. Layla got married, and there's a story about that as well. There's a story about that. What happened was, I'll tell you a bit about it. So there's kids here, I'm not going to tell you. So another time, inshallah. They're too young. Majnun found out about it, basically. Somebody told him, and Majnun collapsed and didn't wake up for some days, they say. But anyway, there's much more to it. Now, I want to relate this al-hub al-udhri to what's related to the Prophet ﷺ. What's related to the Prophet ﷺ. Now, first I want to talk about, and forgive me, some people who have studied privately with this, I have probably talked about this a little bit. What is a relation? How is the Sharia? How does the Sharia deal with love? And what is the purpose of Sharia here? And what's the purpose of love as well? Why is it there? If it's, if you can't manifest your love, then why did God give us that that ability to love people? I want to talk about that, and I want to talk about, and it's very important because I think it's related to all of us. First and foremost, we have a very bad opinion about God, a very, very bad opinion about God. And in this day and age, I swear, wallahi, I have not seen Muslims, well, I'm not, because previously I wouldn't have seen them but read about them, but this day and age, us Muslims, we people have the worst opinion of God. And what does that mean? And I'm going to give several hadiths to kind of emphasize that point. Shaykh Abdullah Sirajuddin, in his book At-Taqarrub ila Allah, Becoming Close to God, has a section on Husnul Dhan Billah, having a good opinion about God. There's a man on the Day of Judgment, and he's for Jahannam, he's from Ahlul Jahannam. He's a person who his deeds are not enough, and he's taken away, and until he gets to Shafatay Nar, which means Shafatay lips, mean literally the edge of the hellfire, and he stops there, and he looks back, and he says, "Is it not the case, God?" Like that. That's what he says. Like, is it? That's what he's saying. And so it said to him, "Is what not the case? What do you mean? Is it not? Is it not the case? Is it? And is it?" And he says, "Is it not what I thought? Is this not? And is nothing? Is this nothing to do with how I felt? What I thought of you?" He said, "How did you think of me?" He said, "I thought, of what you said. Ana inda dhanni abdi bi. I am as my servant thinks." He said, I never envisaged that you will put me in hell. Why are you putting me in hell for?" And God removes him from that punishment and puts him in heaven, because he had husnul dhan billah, just because he had a good opinion about God. Incredibly profound. The worst thing the Prophet ﷺ said one can have is a bad opinion about God. And the reason I mention that is because we have unfortunately made God the punishing God, you see. The punishing God. I'll give you an example. There's a verse in the Quran that when God's verses, signs are recited their hearts tremble. This word wajilat in Arabic doesn't mean tremble. It means they are overcome by love. That's what it actually means. It doesn't mean tremble. Makes no sense. Because let's look at it theologically. God punishing people makes no sense. It doesn't benefit God. What benefit does it bring to God? Nothing. We cannot benefit God in any way or form. It's a very important point. You see? And this is why the Sharia that I want to mention, we often think that Islam is a religion. Our religion is one of, it doesn't let you do anything. I don't get it, because what do you mean by that? Oh, you know, where we have to like refrain, ijtinab, refrain, ijtinab. Why would God restrict us from something unless there was a wisdom behind it? What would be the reason of restricting people? It's like we're almost saying that, oh, we're having loads of fun, and why is God not allowing us to have fun? We're enjoying ourselves. Think about it. Well, if that were the case, if it were about fun and enjoying ourselves, why does God give you Jannah then? Think about it. If God doesn't want you to have a good time and enjoy yourself, why give you a good time and enjoyment for yourself forever in Jannah? It doesn't make sense. If enjoyment were so bad, think about it conceptually. It doesn't make any sense. What's the relationship with Sharia and what we're talking about this with love? Why does and I don't know, you know, Sharia is low determinant, and why does God restrict us in the way that we behave? You know, like, why are we told we can't do this, or why is zina haram? And I'm going to pick that along because this is related to this. You see, why is zina haram? Be that adultery or be that just fornication outside of marriage. Well, it's very simple. If two people have physical relationship, you know what? Get the kids out of here. Who's under 10? Isa. What's your name? I forgot. You go upstairs, play, inshallah. Anybody under 12 can leave. These kids are going to be going back with what? They're thinking we took them out of school because they teach them this. Turn them to the madrasa and they're teaching them even worse things. Survey and all surveyor. Now, what essentially happens is when people have physical relationships, whether they like it or not, there will be an emotional connection or something emotional will develop, you see, unless they're complete animals, which we have a lot of now. You see, now, how can you channel that emotion? You can't channel it, and there's no guarantee for it. Because if people commit zina, let's not even say zina, why is it prohibited for a man to even touch a woman? Why is a prohibition there? Because you can say, look, I love her, I'm not committing zina, I'm just holding hands with her. Why the physical as well? Physical touching is a level beyond just general love. It's an extreme addition to love, or an extreme degree of love. Sorry, it produces even more feeling. It almost magnifies that original feeling. Now, the problem here is this: God doesn't like for humans to emotionally damage themselves. It's a very important point. God does not like that human beings, those who He created, emotionally damage themselves. Why? Because what happens to people who are emotionally damaged? They can't have a relationship with anybody. I'm not talking about another woman, but their general relationships with general people break down. Their relationship with God breaks down. You see, their relationship with families break down because their soul is damaged. Look what the poet said. وَالرُّوحُ يَتَقَطَّعُ, and the soul is shredded. That's what it means. The soul is shredded. That's what damage it does to the soul. God disallowing touching, etc., is a rahmah from Allah. God is protecting the abd here. He's doing it for us. Because God knows what will happen to you. No person can say, who has, for instance, tasted hub, love, and then not being able to channel that hub and being severed from that love, that he's happy or it was worth it. You know, it's nobody will say that because they didn't. What did the poet say? He said, "للوصول يمنعه," like he didn't get anything. He died. He killed himself because they never reached any. They never received anything. Their desire was never ever fulfilled. In fact, they damaged goods probably for many years to come. You know, and this is a very important point. Some people, you know, philosophers, they say time heals, which it probably does, but time doesn't heal the pain that was there at some point. People still go through that pain, you see. So to prevent that, God puts controls in place to save human beings from themselves. God doesn't get anything from telling people, oh, you're going to go to hell, or you're going to get a penal punishment for what you did. You know, you're going to be lashed. What benefit does God get from people getting lashed? Nothing. God is trying to save human state of mind and state of spirit here. And something very, very important. God is not preventing anything. I'll tell you a story. And there's a narration about a man coming to the Prophet ﷺ and he commits adultery. Some say it's disputed, but the meaning is important. And he says to the Prophet ﷺ that I have committed adultery. And the Prophet ﷺ makes an excuse for him. Think about this. Just to think for a minute, think about this. How can you make an excuse for adultery? Generally, you can't. The question is, why is the Prophet ﷺ making an excuse for him? Listen. So the Prophet ﷺ said, okay, you must have flirted with a woman. And the Prophet ﷺ ignores him after that. Okay? Ignores him. And then he comes again to the Prophet ﷺ and says, Ya Rasul, no. I committed adultery. I've come to confess my sin. So the Prophet ﷺ again makes an excuse for him. Says, no, maybe you may have just touched her, it's haram, but you know, make tawbah and ignores him. So he returns again, says, Ya Rasul, no, I committed adultery. The Prophet ﷺ said, maybe you did something physical, but there was but that's it. And then he turned his face from him. Bear in mind what's going. The Prophet ﷺ is making an excuse for a man committing adultery here. Be very clear about this. And we're going to look at the reason why. And then he said it the fourth time. And the Prophet ﷺ wept. He said, what have you left me to give to you out of my mercy? You've left me nothing for you. You see, he said, if you had returned to your home and asked God for forgiveness, he would have forgiven you. But you have publicly declared what you've done now. Because a self-witnessing 4 times is as good as 4 people seeing you do it. And you get capital punishment for that. It's as if you did it on the street. Now, if you retract it, you're free because it's only your own witness. But that's not the point of the narration. The point of the narration was the Prophet ﷺ didn't want to hear it from him. He did not want to hear it from him because if that's to say that people think, or we think, that God sets punishments in place in the Sharia as if people, do you know when you say he deserved it? What does that mean? God doesn't want anybody to be punished. Why would God want you to be punished? It's only there because you did something and you're influencing other people in society to do it also. You do it behind closed doors between you and God. And huwa arhamur rahimin. Inna rahmati taghlibu ala ghadabi. My mercy far surpasses my wrath. Far surpasses my wrath. People have to kind of realize what the Sharia is there for. God wants us to understand God. We've made God very unfortunate into almost a Zeusian God, a man who sits on a throne, with a rod. Anybody who disobeys him, he puts him to the sword. You see, the last verse that was revealed in the Quran, Dr. As was looking at before, the last word is وَهُمْ لَا يُظْلَمُونَ, meaning people, a day will come when they'll be held accountable. And وَهُمْ لَا يُظْلَمُونَ, meaning God will not oppress anybody, meaning they will get exactly what they did. And those who are oppressed, their oppression will be accounted for, i.e. those people who oppress them. Meaning God judges people fairly on the Day of Judgment, but then His rahmah goes beyond that, transcends that, and He forgives who He wishes to forgive. In Another narration that I quoted earlier, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Ana inda dhanni abdi bi, wa in dhanna khayran fa khayr, wa in dhanna sharran fa shar." This is another important point. And by the way, this is God speaking now. God speaking. God says, "I am as my servant thought of me, thought of me." And then God says, وَإِن ظَنَّ خَيْرًا فَخَيْرٌ. If he thought good, that's what he'll get. وَإِن ظَنَّ شَرًّا فَشَرٌ. If he thought punishment, then that's exactly what he'll get. Meaning God is almost exhorting you not to think of him like that. You have to understand what God is trying to say. God is saying, don't think like that. Who would think like that after God says, if you think good of me, that's what you will receive? Is a profound meaning to this, that love itself, for example, related to the Prophet ﷺ, that the law, God placed it there to as a control to keep public order, number one, and also as a control for people's souls to receive what we call true gnosis, ma'arifah of God, because everything else is pointless, you see. But at the same time, God does not in any way dismiss what love is, because God created that faculty in every single person. You know, we often think that, and parents probably told us from a very, cultured society that, oh, love is only what you have for your brother and your sister and your mom and dad. Well, not the case, actually. Love is the different types and different ways, and actual love for the opposite gender is something that people are created with. Absolutely, they're created with it. If that were not the case, we're saying that Adam was a Jannatul Ma'wa. Jannatul Firdaus, or the other names it has, the Jannah that you'll get on the Day of Judgment, that we'll receive, inshallah ta'ala, I'll receive on the Day of Judgment. Nobody's been to that place except the Prophet ﷺ. Nobody has blessed that place. Nobody exists there except Hurul Ain and Ghilan, maybe. Nobody said that Adam has not entered that place, according to the opinion that I seem to adopt. You'll see. That place has only been seen by the Messenger of God, and those people already there that were created in that place. Saying that Adam was in a place of Jannatul Ma'wa. Jannatul Ma'wa is by Sidratul Muntaha. It's in the Quran. وَعِنْدَهَا Jannatul Ma'wa, by the tree, Cloak tree. When Sayyidina Adam was created and placed in this place, it was, and that's not to play down the Jannah, how would I put it? Jannatiyya of the place. How do I translate that? Not to play down the Jannah-esque likeness of the place. Of the place. The place was a Jannah, but Sayyidina Adam very, very quickly felt lonely in the place until he asked God to create for him or a partner to love, for uns, to have a relationship with, companionship with. So this is what Busayri is trying to say. Now we're going to relate it to the Prophet ﷺ. Now, lo and behold, you will not find commentaries actually relating the word. They just stop at that. They talk about Bani Udra, all the stories, incredible stories about love, and then they kind of stop, and they don't relate it back to what. And the last line does, and I want to talk one or two things that my ideas that I haven't. He says, "Minni ilayka walau ansafta lam talumi." He says, if you were truly fair, you would not reproach me at all. Now, in Denmark, when they drew those cartoons, was it in 2007? Yeah. When they drew those cartoons, I was studying the Burda in Damascus. I still remember. And when I heard about the cartoons, this line came into mind immediately. And this was my understanding of it. That this line also applies to people who, just the other day, these people surround a mosque in Phoenix with guns to draw the Prophet ﷺ. To be fair, minni ilaykum law ansaftum, if you actually, these people don't know her, you see. No, not to say they're not bad, they're very bad. I'm not saying they're good. But my point to them is this, that what Busayri is saying here, in fact, all Muslims feel that now. This is very, very important. All Muslims feel that now. And people who attack the Prophet ﷺ don't understand what we feel. It's very important. When it says, Ya la'imi fil hawal udhri, oh you who rebuke me, censure me, I would even interpret to be, oh people who almost mock us for loving the Prophet ﷺ. That's what they do. You know, how can they love a man that, and then they add whatever, they add whatever they want to say. But they don't in it. Busayri is right. If they were just and they knew who we were talking about, they wouldn't ever have, they would never have thought of doing such a thing, or drawing a cartoon. Why don't we draw the Prophet ﷺ? You know, why not? It's not because our stock for drawings are haram. What does that mean? We're very like, a drawings are haram. A stuff, it's like a dirty thing, drawing something. Drawing is a drawing. Halal or haram is a drawing. Why don't we draw the Prophet ﷺ? Who can draw the Prophet ﷺ? You don't. How can you draw somebody you've never seen? And somebody that was only described by the best people after angels, the Sahaba. The person who some people who stayed with him for many years and never saw his face out of embarrassment of lifting their heads in front of him. How are you to draw that? It doesn't make any sense. You couldn't even draw it if you wanted to. Imagine if somebody asked you to draw somebody you love and you were like artist par excellence. There'd always be a blemish. You'd be like, oh, you know what? The nose is just not aquiline enough. Something missing. A drawing never represents the Prophet ﷺ. You see, only seeing the Prophet ﷺ represents him. مَنْ رَآنِي فَقَدْ رَآنِي فَإِنَّ الشَّيْطَانَ لَا يَتَمَثَّلُ بِي. He who has seen me has truly seen me, for shaitan cannot take my form. So I thought of this line then, and to be honest, even now, these people are lost. They don't know what they're missing out on. They don't know. I remember some time ago, somebody came, Muslim guy, but he had some funny positions about the Prophet ﷺ. And I was thinking to myself, boy, oh boy, you don't know what you're missing out on. Sometimes people have problem with Mawlid or things like this. And so same again, you just don't know what you're missing out on. You see, because you have a very technical understanding of the message of God. God doesn't have a technical understanding about him. Wallah, Allah is transcendent beyond all understanding, and the Prophet ﷺ is exactly this. I love that can't be contained. What Majnun had for Layla, if we take it as an archetype, i.e. love, and the extent of that love, only then can somebody truly understand the Prophet ﷺ. I'm going to finish with a few things here about the reality of the Prophet ﷺ. And then, because we have to finish at 9, there's a gathering for sisters, and I'm going to conclude the line, inshallah. And the line will be concluded at, we kind of talk about this theme a lot, which is what does the Prophet ﷺ want from us? You see, God doesn't need anything. Is ghani amma siwa. God is free from everybody, but the Prophet ﷺ is a human being. Yeah. Basharun wa laysa kal bashar, but he's not like a human being. He is angelic in what, when we say in English he's angelic, we don't mean he's an angel, but he has angelic traits. In fact, he has traits. The incredible thing is when you say the Prophet is angelic, it still doesn't do justice, because he's greater than Jibril. So if Jibril is the maximum, the highest level of angelic form, and the Prophet ﷺ is greater. I mean, it doesn't. Angelic is a term still that does not suit the Prophet ﷺ. But what does the Prophet ﷺ want from us? And to me anyway, it seems that the first thing that the Prophet ﷺ does not want from us, because if you want to know what the Prophet wants from us, you have to know what he doesn't want. And if you read the Quran, there's several mentions of the Prophet ﷺ becoming very emotional about this, almost believers despairing. Allah doesn't like that anyway, but the Prophet ﷺ almost being emotionally affected by, in the verse Hadithna alaykum, it's like the depression of a believer affects the messenger of God. This is an incredible, profound point here. that the Prophet ﷺ becomes upset at other people becoming upset, believers. You know, there's a narration that the Prophet ﷺ in battle, his sword never touched a man. He never killed anybody, ever. You see, except one man who he threw the spear at and he grazed him and he died from it. Because of his rahmah, just because of his mercy, he couldn't, his mercy would not allow him to kill anybody, which is profound. So the question is, what doesn't he want from us? And what he, and in a day and age of psychological problems that we do have, we have to remember how us losing hope is affects the Prophet ﷺ in the manner that he doesn't like that from us. Because we often think, what does the Prophet ﷺ want? But we know exactly what he doesn't want from us. You see, when a drunk man and Nu'ayman, he doesn't let anybody speak badly of him. He doesn't want anybody to speak badly of him. You know, يُحِبُّ اللَّهُ وَرَسُولَهُ, he loves God and his messenger. Don't say anything about him. Imagine, you see, because the Prophet ﷺ is affected by the state that Nu'ayman is in. I.e., do you think Nu'ayman wants to drink alcohol? But the Prophet ﷺ is affected by his despair of not being able to quit. You see? So, the first thing I will say is what the Prophet ﷺ doesn't want from us is that we lose a hope in connecting to the Messenger of God, because Babu Rahmah, you know, Da'im Maftuh, always open the door of Rahmah. The second thing is, what does the Prophet ﷺ want from us? And it's very, very simple. Anything that will allow us qurb, closeness to him. We often say that we want to be close to the Prophet ﷺ, but the Prophet ﷺ wants us to be close to him. This is incredibly important. You know, we were talking earlier, I was in a conversation earlier about nowadays if a Shaykh comes and there's murideen and they don't allow anybody else access to the Shaykh. You can't get in. At the beginning you have like a pass, like you have to have contacts. You know, when it's some shuyukh come, people phone me to say, can we hook it up? You want to meet the Shaykh and you need like a back. You need it, it's just the way it is. I'm not justifying it, I'm just saying that's the way things have become. The Prophet ﷺ were never like that. And I'm not saying it's a Shaykh's fault, people have become like that around. And not only that, the people around the Prophet ﷺ were not like that. They would look for people to bring to the Prophet ﷺ. Imagine that. They would look for people to bring to the Messenger of God. And the Messenger of God not only did that, he told everybody how to be there. He said, do this and you'll be right next to me. How can 3,000 men around him all think that they equally are loved in the same manner? And let's be very, very honest. If you have brothers and sisters, we all know who the mother's favorite is. My family ain't me. I'm pretty clear, and I've made my peace with that. You see, there's always a disparity, you see. We know it. We don't blame the mother for that, but we know that there's a leaning towards. But how is it that thousands of men around the Messenger of God alayhi salatu cannot see any disparity? That they argue amongst each other. Zayd, Ja'far and Ali radiallahu anhum, they go into the room and they say, Ya Rasulullah, you know, Sayyidina Ali says, look, Sayyidina Ja'far says, look, Ya Rasulullah, just tell them, because they've been arguing with me for no reason. I've just come here, I'm not come here for confirmation. I've just come here just so, because you've told me, just tell them as well. Just for that, just if you can, just tell them, and then it's settled. And they walk out of the room, all of them. Then Sayyidina Ali says, Ya Rasulullah, Ja'far doesn't know it. You know, last time where you told me, he doesn't know about that. You see, Zayd says, Ya Rasulullah, I've been in your house for how long? They, you know, those moments, obviously, just if you can just tell them very quickly, and just we can go, and it's no problem being second or third. No problem. It's still honorable. There are loads of us second or third. And the amazing thing, they all leave the house and they're still arguing. I told you. He said, but I told you. He said, but I told you. You see, they're still arguing, which is an incredible point. Sometimes it's different, because the ones that, when the man came to the Prophet, I finished on this, and he said, Ya Rasulullah, who do you love the most? He said, I love Aisha. And another narration, actually, you'll see there's a theme, and I'm just going to tell you the secret in all these themes. Every single narration excludes, say, the Fatima Zahra alayhi salam. Bear that in mind. Al-Itlaq, don't mention her name. whenever people kind of even intend to ask the question, to keep your mouth shut. If you bring Sayyidah Fatima's name into this discussion, nobody should ever answer your question. Sayyidah Fatima, there's no place to discuss her here. She to the Messenger of God is something that we don't discuss. In comparing. When it comes to Sayyidah Fatima to Zahra alayhi salam, she has literally her own like cosmos. That's a completely different relationship. Sayyidah Fatima is not to be discussed. Sayyidah Fatima to the Prophet ﷺ is part of his own body. Budu'a minni, he said. He who hurts Fatima hurts me, he who hurts me hurts God. It isn't something simple. So anybody asks, do you keep that out of your mind then? You keep that out of your mind. But he said, Aisha, he said, well, that's your wife, Ya Rasulullah. But men, he said, her father. He said, okay, fair enough. Abu Bakr, mashallah. Yeah? They was in the ghar, Allah verses about, I don't mind being second. Umar. He said, I didn't want to be third, so I just left. But he wouldn't have been third, you see, because then there's Allahu Akbar. So, from this line, what we need to take, I don't think, myself anyway, Hawal Udhri is difficult, but I swear by God, the only thing that will save people's iman in this day and age is the Prophet ﷺ. Nothing else. I tell you now, and I don't say I'm not boasting. My studies at the moment are just completely, utterly focused in advanced theology. I swear by God, theology has nothing that will save you in it. I swear to you, study of advanced theology has nothing that will save you. The only thing that will save your iman is the Prophet ﷺ. In your mind, to think of him as his character, as the love for him will only save you. The nisbah to the Messenger of God. If people don't have it, and you can survey atheists, murtads that have left Islam, and how much connection to the Prophet ﷺ they had to begin with, there's the only thing that will save people until Yawm al-Qiyamah is a nisbah to the Messenger of God alayhi salam. Nothing else will save them. You can give people the greatest theological Razian, Ash'arian argument you want. It will not save them. What will save them is their deep, deep connection to the Messenger of God, pure and utter love. Al-Hawal Udhri will save people in this world from kufr. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر لي ولكم وأتوب إليه. See you next month, inshallah.